My name is Riley Fitzgerald, 32 years old. James was threading cufflinks through his French cuffs like a surgeon prepping for theater, the kind of focus reserved for things that glitter under chandeliers. The living room smelled faintly of his cologne and dry cleaning starch. Behind him, the garment bag he'd unzipped was the color of champagne. It matched his new life. "Don't wait up," he said, eyes on the mirror. "The club gala runs late." I leaned in the doorway with grease under my nails I hadn't been able to scrub out, still in my shop shirt from a long day on a Cummins rebuild. "Another solo event?" He hesitated, then set the cufflink down. "Riley, we need to talk about that." "About what?" He turned, and I watched him choose the words the way he chose wine, looking for a label that impressed. "These people are refined. They talk investments, art funds, second homes on the Sound. You'd be uncomfortable." "Because I talk torque ratios," I said lightly. "Because," he said, softening his tone as if that would cushion the blow, "you might embarrass me." The words landed like a wrench dropped from a ladder. I could have told him that the house he lived in, with the paid-off mortgage and the old porch that sang in summer rain, wasn't his to curate, that it was my grandmother's, and then my father's, and then mine. I could have told him that the ring he'd been saving up for was a conversation we hadn't gotten to because I'd been waiting to see if we were walking the same direction. I could have told him a lot of things. Instead, I took a sip of water and said, "Understood." He relaxed, mistaking quiet for consent. "I'm protecting you from feeling out of place." "No," I said, setting the glass down. "I understand perfectly." He left in a tux that made his shoulders look broader. After the door closed, I stood in the living room and let the silence take shape. The clock over the mantel ticked like a metronome, steadying my hands. Then I made a phone call I'd avoided for 5 years. "Ellie?" My sister picked up on the second ring, the soundtrack of a kitchen and a life I hadn't visited enough clattering in the background. "You never call at this hour," Eleanor said. "Everything okay?" "I need to come to the club Saturday," I said. A beat. "Oh, you're joking." "I'm not." "You haven't set foot here since Dad's funeral." "I know," I said. "Things change." She went quiet then. "Is this about your boyfriend? The farmer rep who just got in through Carl's sponsorship?" Eleanor handled member approvals. Nothing surprised her. "Riley." "I want the staff to know I'm coming," I said. "Full treatment." "Oh," she breathed, a note of mischief slipping in. "This is going to be fun." After we hung up, I went to the garage. My '03 F-250 sat patient and unfashionable under the fluorescent light, the same truck James complained about when I parked it in the front drive. Beyond it, under a tarp, lay the bones of a '67 Camaro I'd been coaxing back from the dead. The garage smelled like solvent and possibility. What James didn't know, what I'd kept to myself because some inheritances felt like traps, was that the country club he'd joined was the one my father built out of a 9-hole dream in 1987. When he died, he left the business to Eleanor and me. She ran it. I signed papers once a year, cashed the dividend checks, and donated most of them to the technical college's scholarship fund. My father and I had our own unfinished argument about what a life should look like. He'd wanted suits, I'd chosen steel-toed boots. We ran out of time to decide who was right. I wiped my hands on a rag and sat with that old ache until it felt like something I could carry without limping. Friday night, James texted a photo from the club bar. Smoked glass, brighter smiles. "Carl's here. Board president too. Big night." I sent back a thumbs up and a photo of a timing cover I'd finally wrestled into place. He didn't respond. Saturday, I waited until the auction was in full swing before I drove over. The club's Georgian facade glowed under string lights, crisp as a catalog. The valet jogged when he saw me pull in. Ellie had done her part. "Ms. Fitzgerald," he said, breathless with professionalism. "Welcome." He didn't flinch at the truck. Inside, the air was polished wood and money. Staff straightened like I was a surprise inspection. Harrison, the general manager who'd worked with my dad for 20 years, almost cracked his composure. "Ms. Fitzgerald," he said warmly. "A pleasure. Your sister said you might attend." "Good to see you, Harrison. The place looks beautiful. Shall I escort you to the Lafayette Ballroom?" "I know the way," I said, and his relief was something like affection. The ballroom was a coral reef of gowns and black ties. A string quartet sawed the air into something elegant. I spotted James near the bar, laughing with a cluster of women and a tall man who had to be Carl. Before I could decide whether to make a straight line for them, a voice boomed across the room. "Riley Fitzgerald, well, I'll be damned." Doug Whitmore, my father's friend and current board president, cut through the crowd like a smiling icebreaker. He pulled me into a hug that scandalized a few diamonds. "About time," he said, eyes bright. Then louder. "Ladies and gentlemen, Tom Fitzgerald's daughter is here." The shift was palpable, heads turned. Whispers rose like heat. I endured the reintroductions. A handful of legacy families remembered me as a kid running barefoot across the fairway, hair wild, pockets full of teas. Every handshake was a reminder of a story I hadn't chosen, but couldn't outrun. James saw me when Doug said my last name the second time. His mouth stuttered around a word that didn't land. Carl blinked like he was adjusting to sudden light. "Riley?" Carl said when we reached them. "Tom's, I had no idea you were—" "Me either," James said faintly. I didn't—" "Good to see you, Carl," I said smoothly. "The pediatric wing auction looks strong." "Thanks to your family," he said, catching up fast. The women around James, perfectly polite a minute ago, arranged their faces to curious. Behind me, someone snapped a photo. It sounded like a trap closing. Doug, bless his shameless heart, made it worse in the best way. "James, right? You're dating Riley, aren't you? Lucky man. This club wouldn't exist without her father." James swallowed, eyes flicking between me and Carl. "Right." I let the moment hang just long enough to mean something. Then I nodded at the bar. "I'm going to grab a drink." I didn't chase him. Instead, I found myself talking to a man who collected classic cars and wanted to know whether a carb overhaul on his '72 Chevelle should be OEM or modernized. A woman asked my opinion about outboard motors for a lake house. Funny thing, rich people had hobbies too, and half of them ran on engines. When people talk to you because they want your mind, it feels nothing like charity. My phone buzzed like a trapped bee. "James, we need to talk now." "James, this isn't funny. You lied to me." "James, stop ignoring me." I slipped the phone back into my clutch. Carl had drifted closer, expression apologetic. "Riley," he said low. "If I had known, James told us you were in transportation and uncomfortable with crowds." "People show you who they are, Carl," I said. "Eventually." He winced. "You deserve better." "I know." I bid $20,000 on a week in Aspen. I didn't want for the children's hospital, I did. When the auctioneer's gavel fell, I felt the room's temperature settle around me. A recognition that had nothing to do with engines and everything to do with finally standing where I belonged, on my own terms. James wasn't at the bar when I looked up. He wasn't anywhere. Fine, I thought. We could talk at home, somewhere without chandeliers. At 10, I left. The valet jogged again. The night air tasted like rain. James's car was already in my driveway. He was pacing the living room, jacket off, sleeves shoved to his elbows like rage needed room. 3 years, he said when I walked in. You hid this for 3 years. I didn't hide anything. You never asked. You deliberately made me think you were just some mechanic. I am a mechanic, I said evenly. I fix diesel engines. That's my job. You own a country club. I inherited a quarter of one. Eleanor owns another quarter. A trust holds the rest. I don't run it. I barely acknowledge it exists. He raked a hand through his hair. Do you have any idea how humiliated I am? I've been telling everyone you didn't fit in, and you're literally their landlord. You're humiliated? I said, something cold moving into place inside me. You told me I was too embarrassing to be seen with. You said I'd embarrass you. That was before I knew. And that's the problem. Tears tried his face on, then anger slapped them off. He tried everything. Apologies, accusations, the word test thrown like a dart. You were testing me, he said. It's not fair. I didn't set out to test anyone, I said. I wanted to be loved for who I am, not what comes on a balance sheet with my last name. He stared, breathing hard. We're still getting married, he said suddenly, wild. 4 months. This doesn't change anything. You're right, I said. It doesn't. You showed me who you are. I showed you who I am. We're not getting married. You can't be serious. Take off the ring, I said, and realized as I said it that he'd never put one on my hand. Take your things, I corrected, and take tonight as the last time you get to call this house home. He gaped. Then the meltdown. Deposits, plane tickets, his mother's expectations, my alleged cruelty. You're ruining my life, he said. You ruined your own life, I said, opening the door, when you decided I wasn't good enough for your new friends. He stormed past me. The tires squealed. The night swallowed the sound. I locked the door and leaned my back against it, staring at the living room James had believed was a waiting room for something better. The house exhaled with me. Old wood, settling around a choice that felt both heavy and clean. My phone pinged, a name I didn't expect. Eleanor, you okay? Me, yes. Eleanor, good. Also, prepare yourself. Monday will be entertaining. I almost asked her what she meant. Then I didn't. Some storms announce themselves. Others, you wait for. I turned off the lights and walked through the house, laying a hand on the mantel, the doorway, the few places that still felt like Dad might be watching. In the garage, the truck and the Camaro sat where I'd left them, honest and unbothered. Understood, I whispered to the quiet room, and meant something entirely different than I had 2 nights ago. By Sunday morning, the city had already chewed last night into gossip. I woke to a dozen texts that weren't from James, 2 from Harrison, thanking me for attending, 1 from Doug that read, "About time, kid," and 3 from numbers I didn't recognize. All some version of "you carried yourself with class." The absence on my screen felt louder than anything else. At 9:10 a.m., Eleanor called. "Ready for your first post-reveal fire drill?" Define ready. James tried to book the grand ballroom at 9 sharp. For what? For your wedding, she said dryly. To you. He told events the reconciliation was romantic destiny and wanted to move the venue here as a fresh start. I sat up. Cancel it. Already did, she said. Also, he charged just over $8,000 in champagne and hors d'oeuvres on his member number last night, claiming it was a Fitzgerald family celebration. When accounting called to verify, I finished, he said I authorized it. Bingo. I've revoked his house privileges pending investigation. You should know, he's going to escalate. He can try, I said, but my stomach tightened all the same. At 10:02, my doorbell rang. The kind of ring that didn't ask permission. I opened it to a white Mercedes, a pale cardigan, and a face that practiced composure professionally. James's mother, Patricia. We need to discuss this like adults, she said, sweeping past me into the living room as if she'd grown up in it. She looked around with the faint confusion of someone expecting glossier finishes. Well, this is homey. I'm headed to the shop in 20 minutes, I said, keeping my voice even. Say what you came to say. She clasped her hands. James is devastated. He's had to move back home. Do you have any idea what you've done to his reputation? What I've done? He made one tiny mistake. I stared at her. He told me I was too embarrassing to be seen with. He lied to a room full of people and tried to spend money that wasn't his. He tried to book a ballroom for a wedding I ended last night. That was enthusiasm, she said. Any woman would want to show off a man with your assets. And there it was, clean as glass. Not that her son had been cruel, but that he'd been cruel to someone who could afford to mind. The problem wasn't the insult, it was the target. So, I said quietly, it would have been fine if I actually were just a mechanic. Don't twist my words. Her tone sharpened. James deserves a lifestyle befitting his ambitions. Then he should earn it, I said. I'm not a lottery ticket. Color rose in her cheeks. We're prepared to be reasonable. She smoothed her cardigan, recalibrating. James will sign a prenup if that's your concern. He'll apologize publicly. We can do counseling. This isn't a negotiation, Patricia. She flinched at her own first name. You're throwing away a very good match because your pride is bruised. I'm ending a relationship with a man who made sure I felt small before he learned the dimensions of the room, I said, opening the door. Please leave before I ask someone to escort you. Her mouth flattened. You will regret this, she said, and swept past me into the daylight. The Mercedes swallowed her whole. By noon, the service bay at the shop was a better church than any cathedral. The air was hot oil and stubborn bolts. My body knew what to do when a seized pulley stared me down. Machines don't gaslight. They tell you exactly where they're broken. At 2:30, Carl called. I wiped my hands and stepped into the alley to take it. Riley, he said, voice stripped of last night's conviviality, replaced with something sober. I owe you an apology. If I had known... He trailed off. James misrepresented you. To me, to our clients, to the team. He used the membership as leverage, promising introductions he couldn't deliver. This morning I found out he'd been name-dropping the Fitzgeralds to move product. I can't keep him on. You're firing him, I said. I'm letting him go, he said, corporate to the end. Effective immediately. I stared at the sunlight on the grease-dark concrete. Relief wasn't the right word. Justice wasn't either. Consequence, maybe. Thanks for telling me. For what it's worth, he added, you handled last night with more poise than anyone in that room. For what it's worth, I said. Engines are easier. We hung up. I went back inside and lost myself in the work until the day tucked itself into orderly piles, bolts and cups, gaskets labeled, a carburetor rebuilt to spec. When I locked up at 7, my phone had bloomed a fresh bouquet of messages. I scrolled past the ones from unknown numbers and stopped at Eleanor's. Eleanor. Security just flagged James at the front desk trying to clarify his charges. He asked if I'd taken his fiancée's side. Me. Your side is the club's. Eleanor. Always. Come by in the morning? Me. If I must. Eleanor. Bring coffee. Harrison takes his with 1 sugar. I'll take a medal. I smiled despite myself. Monday brought a new angle. A LinkedIn message from a woman named Tessa with a profile photo in hospital scrubs and a bio that read RN, dog person, recovering from bad judgment. The preview text stopped me cold. He did this to me too. I clicked. Riley, the message began. You don't know me. I dated James 2 years ago. When he learned my dad owned commercial property, he tried to get back together. When I said no, he told our mutual friends I might be pregnant. Then he tried to say I'd trapped him. I'm telling you because he escalates when he loses control. Watch yourself. I read it twice, then a third time. Then I took screenshots and sent them to Eleanor with a single line, adding to the file. She replied with a skull emoji and a gavel. By mid-afternoon, my phone vibrated itself into a migraine. James alternated between fury and pleading. James, we can fix this. I overreacted. James, you humiliated me on purpose. James, I'll change. I'll prove it. James, my mother's beside herself. You owe us a conversation. I typed and deleted a lot of words that wouldn't help either of us. In the end, I sent none. At 4:12, Harrison called from the club. Ms. Fitzgerald, he said, a formality that meant trouble. We've had a situation. What kind of situation? Mr. Lawson is at this gate for the ladies' tennis tournament. He's insisting he's still your fiancé, and that termination of his membership is a misunderstanding. Security is managing, but there's an audience. Of course there was. Some people devour scandal like sugar. I'm on my way, I said. By the time I turned up the long drive, the knot at the entrance had swelled. Visors and whites, a guard with a clipboard, the low electric hum of expensive impatience. James stood at the center like a man who'd mistaken attention for validation. When he saw my truck, relief and triumph fought for his face. Riley, thank God, he said loudly. Tell them who I am. I parked, stepped out, and closed the door carefully. The hush that fell wasn't silence. It was appetite. I know exactly who you are, I said. You're a former member who is no longer welcome on this property. You can't do this, he said, the volume of a man performing for the second tier. I have friends here. Then they can meet you somewhere else. This is illegal, he said, desperate. I paid my dues. Eleanor appeared at my shoulder as if she'd conjured herself. Her voice was polite and lethal. Your membership was corporate sponsored by Carl Hendricks, she said. Since you no longer work there, and since you charged thousands to the club under false pretenses, your membership is terminated. You will receive a refund of your personal contribution, which was $0. The crowd tittered like a flock. James's eyes flicked wildly, scanning for sympathy, for weakness, for a crack in the wall. He tried a new tactic, ugly and old. She's pregnant, he said suddenly, pointing at me, voice catching the wind. She's having my child. Gasps. The word curled through the gathering like smoke. I laughed. I couldn't help it. No, I said, I'm not. You can't. How would you know? He flailed. Because we haven't been intimate in 2 months, I said, calm. You've been too busy with your club activities. Also, your ex-girlfriend Tessa warned me you like to use pregnancy as leverage. For a beat, his expression was pure fury. Mask off, plan foiled. Then he recovered into grievance. You're all witnessing this abuse, he told the phones that had risen like flowers. This is humiliation. Doug stepped forward, geniality gone. Sir, you're trespassing. Leave now, or we call the police. His voice had the iron of someone who had called the police before and would again without flinching. James looked at me, and for a moment something small and real flickered. Fear, maybe. Not of the law, of irrelevance. Then he turned on his heel, hurled words over his shoulder about truth and exposure, and stalked to his car. He peeled out so fast the tires squealed against the club's decorum. A dozen cameras caught the smoke. Eleanor exhaled. Add public performance to his resume, she said, pinching the bridge of her nose. Harrison, please note the incident file. Already on it, he said, and retreated with relief. "Are you okay?" she asked me softly when the crowd began to dissolve into eager postmortems. "I'm fine," I said, and I meant it. Something had snapped into place I didn't have to hold anymore. That night, the video hit TikTok with the caption, "Guy says mechanic girlfriend too embarrassing for his country club, finds out she owns it. Then tries the pregnancy card." 2 million views by morning. The comments were a Greek chorus with Wi-Fi. On Tuesday, Patricia called one last time. "Make it stop," she said without hello. "He's losing everything." "I'm not doing anything," I said. "James's choices are simply experiencing gravity." "You'll regret this," she whispered, smaller now. I hung up and stared at my hands. The grease lines, the half moons my nails always seemed to have. These were the hands that rebuilt engines and paid off mortgages and closed doors gently, and also sometimes firmly enough that they didn't open again. At 6:20, the shop was quiet enough to hear the metal cool. I locked up, climbed into my truck, and drove the long way home past the course where Dad used to walk the fairways at dusk, counting irrigation heads. The sky over 9 was pink, the kind that hurts because it's beautiful. My phone vibrated once more. "Eleanor, board meets tomorrow. Come. I have an idea you're going to like." "Define like," I texted back. "Scholarships," she replied, "for kids who remind me of you." For the first time since the words "you'd embarrass me" left James's mouth, my chest didn't feel tight. It felt full. "Understood," I wrote, and this time there was only one meaning. The boardroom at the club was all oak and old money, the kind of room that once made me feel like an intruder, but not anymore. Eleanor sat at the head of the table, flipping through the scholarship proposal she'd drafted overnight. The morning sun bounced off her glasses, making her look like some benevolent general. "This," she said, tapping the folder, "is our first good PR move in weeks." "Scholarships for vocational trades," Doug added, sipping his coffee. "Mechanics, carpenters, welders, the kind of work your father would have called real. About damn time this place remembered where it came from." It was surreal hearing that here, in a room where I'd once overheard board members debate whether the snack bar should serve caviar. "I love it," I said. "Let's fund the first 10 through the club foundation. I'll match the amount personally." Eleanor smiled. "You're full of surprises lately." "I get that a lot." When the meeting adjourned, I stayed behind for a moment, walking to the window that overlooked the 9th green. The grounds crew was out there, men in worn hats, their hands steady on the mowers. My kind of people, the kind who made beauty without being thanked for it. I thought of my father again. He'd have liked this idea, a bridge between his world and mine. For all our fights, we'd agreed on one thing. People deserve to be proud of what they built. By afternoon, the scholarship announcement was on the club's website. The comments rolled in fast. Finally, something real. Didn't expect this kind of class from a country club. Tom Fitzgerald would be proud. I almost believed it was over, that karma had done its work. Almost. At 4:17 p.m., Eleanor's name flashed across my phone again. "He's back," she said. I didn't even need to ask who. Security's got him at the gate. Same story. Says he's still your fiancé, that there's been a misunderstanding. "Do not let him in," I said, grabbing my keys. "Wasn't planning to, but you should come anyway. It's public." When I arrived, the parking lot was half full of SUVs and tennis whites. The ladies' tournament had just ended, and a small audience had gathered near the gate, phones out like they were waiting for another viral episode. James stood in the middle of it all, trying to keep his voice measured, but loud enough for everyone to hear. His suit was wrinkled. His tie hung limp, as if even it didn't believe in him anymore. "Riley," he said the second I stepped out of my truck, his relief almost manic. "Finally, tell them this is all a mistake." "It's not a mistake," I said, walking toward him. "It's a boundary." "You can't just erase me," he said, his tone slipping between pleading and performative outrage. "We're engaged." "We were," I corrected, past tense. A few of the women in the crowd exchanged glances. I caught snippets. "That's the mechanic. That's the one who owns the place. He looks awful." "Mr. Lawson," Eleanor's voice carried from behind me, calm, cutting, and authoritative. "You are no longer a member. Your corporate sponsorship has been revoked by Carl Hendricks. You also committed fraud against this institution by charging expenses to an account that wasn't yours." "This is illegal," he barked, turning to the crowd for sympathy. "I paid dues. You can't just throw me out." Eleanor raised an eyebrow. "Your personal contribution was $0. The crowd rippled with soft laughter. Someone whispered, "Ouch!" "Riley," James said, trying one last tactic, his voice cracking like a child's. "You're better than this. You're not cruel." "I'm not," I said, "but I'm done being kind to people who mistake kindness for weakness." He stared at me, eyes darting, searching for an angle that didn't exist anymore. Then, his desperation twisted into something uglier. "She's lying," he shouted suddenly, pointing at me. "She's pregnant. She's using all this to hide it." The crowd gasped. Even Eleanor looked stunned for half a second. I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because the audacity was exhausting. "No, I'm not." He blinked. "You can't know that." "Yes, I can," I said, folding my arms, "because we haven't been together in 2 months, and because your ex-girlfriend warned me you pull this move when you run out of charm." That earned a murmur of disbelief from the onlookers. Someone snorted. Another whispered, "Oh my God, he's recycling lies." James's face turned red, blotchy, furious. He jabbed a finger at me. "You're all witnessing this abuse. She's ruining my life." Doug stepped forward then, his voice booming like thunder across the manicured lawn. "Son, the only thing ruining your life is your own behavior. Now get off this property before I call the police." "Police?" James sneered. "You think—" Doug didn't raise his voice again. He didn't have to. "You have 30 seconds. The security guard shifted closer. The crowd parted. The phones stayed up. For a moment, James looked like he might keep fighting, like pride was the only oxygen left in his lungs. But then something flickered. Fear, shame, realization. I couldn't tell. He turned and walked briskly to his car. He slammed the door, revved the engine like a threat he couldn't afford, and peeled out of the lot, leaving nothing but tire marks and the sour smell of burnt rubber. Eleanor exhaled, rubbing her temples. That man could turn a Shakespeare monologue into a tantrum. The crowd began dispersing, buzzing with whispers. I caught pieces as they passed. Guess the mechanic wasn't the one pretending. Karma's undefeated. I feel bad for her, kind of. I didn't feel bad. I felt free. "Come on," Eleanor said softly. "Let's get you a drink." We walked back towards the clubhouse. The sun was starting to dip, laying gold light across the grass. Inside, Doug was already at the bar, ordering 2 whiskeys and a club soda. He looked at me over his glass. "You handled that with more grace than I would have." "I've had practice," I said. He chuckled. "You remind me of your dad when he finally learned how to let go of idiots." "That took him 50 years. Doug smiled. "Takes most of us longer." By nightfall, the video was everywhere. A member's teenage daughter had filmed the entire confrontation from her car and posted it with the caption, "Guy calls his girlfriend too embarrassing for his country club. Finds out she owns it. Then lies about a pregnancy." 3 hours later, it hit 2 million views. The comments section was a war zone. "This is Oscar-level karma. You can't out-scheme a Fitzgerald. He really thought pregnancy would save him? Bro, read the room." I should have been mortified. Instead, I was eating leftover Thai food on my couch, scrolling through them with a weird sense of catharsis. It wasn't revenge. It was closure with subtitles. When my phone rang again, I almost didn't answer, until I saw the name. Patricia. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, the message came through. "You think this makes you a hero? He's lost everything because of you." I deleted it, then turned off my phone. The next morning, Eleanor forwarded a press release from Carl's company. "James Lawson no longer employed as of this week. We wish him the best in his future endeavors." Short, cold, perfect. By lunchtime, the sun had burned through the last bit of morning fog. I drove to the technical college, dropped off a donation envelope marked Fitzgerald Trades Scholarship, and spent the afternoon helping one of the instructors replace an engine block for the diesel mechanics class. When I wiped my hands on my rag, the instructor, a guy named Mark who taught welding next door, grinned. "Heard about the country club drama," he said. "That was you, huh?" "Unfortunately." He laughed. "Don't worry. Out here we call that justice." Justice. Maybe that was what this was. Not perfect, not pretty, but honest. And maybe for the first time in my life, that was enough. 3 weeks after the gate incident, the echo finally started to fade. The video was still circling local feeds, but the noise had become background hum, no longer sharp enough to cut. For the first time in years, my life felt steady. Mornings at the shop, evenings in quiet places that didn't require reservations, no text messages asking me to wear heels for appearances. Eleanor and I were closer than we'd ever been. Every Friday, I drove to the club for dinner with her and Doug, half to discuss the new vocational scholarship, half to make sure no one set fire to the place. The first 10 scholarships went to kids who reminded me of my younger self. Curious, unpolished, stubborn, in the best way. Two were welders, one a diesel apprentice, one already restoring a motorcycle in his uncle's shed. Seeing their faces when we handed them those letters did something to me I hadn't felt since before Dad died. I think he would have been proud, not of the money, but of what it bought, a chance. James, of course, didn't vanish quietly. Patricia showed up one last time, wearing grief like a costume. She waited outside the shop after closing, her Mercedes idling under the flickering streetlight. Natalie. It's Riley, I corrected automatically. Riley, fine. Her voice trembled, but her eyes didn't. He's lost everything. His job, his reputation, his friends. He's drinking again. That's unfortunate. You could fix this, she said. A statement, maybe. Say you overreacted. I didn't overreact, I said. I responded. He's depressed, she pressed. You were his future. No, I said, calm now. He was trying to make me his future funding. There's a difference. Patricia's lips tightened. You think this makes you noble? He's the one suffering. He's the one who lied, stole, and humiliated himself. I just stopped protecting him from the mirror. She flinched, actually flinched, and for a second I almost felt sorry for her. Then she straightened her cardigan like armor and said, You'll regret this. I already don't, I said. She left in a whirl of exhaust and perfume, a ghost of entitlement trailing behind her. That night, I drove to the club's back nine. The course was empty, dew silvering the grass under the floodlights. I sat on the hood of my truck and looked out across everything my father had built. For so long, I'd avoided this place because it felt like an inheritance I hadn't earned. But now, it didn't feel like his world or mine. It felt like something rebuilt. Sometimes that's all legacy really is, what you rebuild after someone else breaks it. By spring, things shifted again. Doug had been pestering me for months to visit the technical college where my scholarship funds were going. I finally did. That's where I met Mark Alvarez, the welding instructor. He was 34, all sawdust hair and sunburned forearms, the kind of man who looked at engines the way most people looked at art. He recognized me from the scholarship plaques. You're that Fitzgerald, he said. The country club one. God, don't call me that. He laughed. Relax. Out here, country club just means good shop funding. We hit it off easily. No games, no subtext. Over cheap coffee, he told me about his students, his side projects, his old truck he'd been restoring for 3 years. Runs fine, he said, but the frame's shot. Every time I think I've fixed it, something else rattles loose. Sounds like life, I said. He grinned. Maybe, but at least it still moves. That night, when I told Eleanor about him, she raised an eyebrow. A welder. You've got a type. I guess I do. He's not going to mind the TikTok fame. He already made a joke about printing the comments on a shirt. Keep him, she said, smiling. He sounds real. Meanwhile, James's downfall kept trickling through the grapevine. After losing his job, he tried to pivot to consulting, then to selling luxury timeshares, then, according to one of Eleanor's friends, to promoting a wellness MLM. His Instagram bio changed weekly, from entrepreneur in transition to life coach / survivor / Phoenix Rising. I didn't hate him for it. I didn't wish him harm. I just wished he'd stop trying to reinvent himself as the victim. Because that's what he did in his last message to me. A long email titled Closure and Growth. He wrote about therapy, about reflection, about realizing he'd been driven by fear. Then came the real thesis. I'm willing to forgive you for the deception if you're willing to forgive my mistakes. I laughed out loud. Not meanly, just in disbelief. He was still negotiating blame like it was a trade deal. I forwarded it to Eleanor. She called within a minute, laughing so hard she was crying. The lion, the witch, and the audacity of this man. Exactly, I said. She wiped her eyes. Do you ever think you'll answer him? No, I said. I think silence says it best. By summer, Mark and I were officially together. The simplicity of it stunned me. He didn't care about what I owned, only what I built. He didn't ask me to hide who I was or where I came from. When I finally told him the whole story, about James, the club, the viral fallout, he nearly choked on his beer laughing. So let me get this straight, he said between breaths. He told you you weren't good enough for his rich friends, and you literally owned the place? Technically co-owned. He pointed his beer at me. That's the most satisfying thing I've ever heard. Please tell me someone got that on camera. I pulled up the TikTok. He watched the whole clip twice, wheezing. You even kept your cool. Meanwhile, I would have thrown a wrench at him. That's why they don't let you near PR. He laughed, leaned over and kissed me, still smiling. You know what I like most about you? What? You didn't win by hurting him. You just told the truth and let it do the heavy lifting. That line stuck with me. Because it was true. I hadn't needed revenge. The truth had always been enough. It just needed to be seen. A few months later, Eleanor hosted a dinner at the club for the first scholarship class. Mark came with me, wearing jeans and his best plaid shirt. The same crowd that once whispered behind their martinis now shook his hand like he was royalty. Doug raised his glass halfway through dessert. "To Riley," he said, "for teaching this club a lesson in remembering its roots." I tried to laugh it off, but Mark squeezed my hand under the table. "Take the compliment," he whispered. After dinner, he wandered out to the terrace, talking horsepower with Doug about the old Bronco he was restoring. I stood by the doorway, watching the two of them laughing under the string lights, and realized something simple and seismic. I was happy. No spectacle, no performance, no proving myself to people who only loved me conditionally. Just happy. A few weeks later, Eleanor texted me late at night. "Saw Patricia at the grocery store. She looked tired." I typed, "I hope they're okay," and meant it. Because real closure isn't about victory, it's about peace. And peace, I'd learned, doesn't come from payback. It comes from walking away when the noise stops being your problem. I still go to the club sometimes. Jeans, work boots, grease on my hands. Nobody whispers anymore. The staff treat me with respect. Not because I inherited this place, but because they saw what happens when someone tries to bury honesty under arrogance. The inheritance is still there. Numbers on paper, property and trust, but that's not the part that matters. The part that matters is the one I built myself. Mark's Bronco finally runs. We drive it down to the lake some Sundays, fishing gear in the back, music on low. Every now and then, a news alert still pings about some influencer scandal or ex-fiancé trying to rebrand. I let them scroll by. Because I've learned the rarest kind of freedom doesn't come from revenge or reputation. It comes from finally, completely choosing your own peace. And I did.